There was a small cemetery in rural Illinois that I'd go to at night to take pictures from grade school through early college. It was fairly old. There were graves from the 1800s as well as people from today. There wasn't a lot of houses around either, just farms spread out across cornfields. Over the years, I collected a few pictures of orbs and some mists. I've had quite a few experiences as a result of these visits. The one that makes me feel the least comfortable is the one I'm about to describe. It was a quiet night at the cemetery, taking pictures with my father and younger brother. The early days of my excursions out there in the dead of night. No strangeness or anything out of the ordinary occurred while we were there. Just a cool night in the country under a billion stars. When we got home, we put my dad's SD card in the computer and discovered that he had gotten quite a good picture of a ghostly mist over a grave. The way I could describe it is it looked like you could have been holding a lit cigarette under the lens. Not longer afterwards, our dog starts barking out the window next to the computer. He barks consistently for 20 minutes. It wasn't odd for him to bark outside, it was the timing. So we went outside and looked around, but there were no squirrels or any other creatures of the night, so I went to bed and passed out. I opened my eyes to see my red digital clock was at 3 a.m. on the dot. I sleep with no lights on, so my room was pitch black, and over the stillness of the night, I heard this faint sliding sound. It was very smooth, like soft wood on carpet. My eyes were open, but my mind was mostly asleep, so I didn't really process the sound and went back to sleep. I woke up in the morning for school and looked at my desk in the corner of the room. The wooden chair had been pulled out from the desk and turned to face my bed perfectly. My desk was right next to the door in my room, and if the chair wasn't pushed in, then I wouldn't be able to get out. So I always kept it in when I wasn't using it. The implication of that still gives me chills every time I think about it. That experience changed the way I approach the paranormal. Since then, when I'm leaving a place after poking around, I'm always very polite but firm in saying out loud that potential spirits are not welcome to follow me home, and it's pretty much worked for me ever since. I ended up having a few more strange things happen in my room over the course of a year. There'd be the occasional but very obvious feeling of a presence, day and night, and one night I was wide awake in my bed when it felt like someone sat on the end of my bed. As silly as this sounds, I made a bargain with this spirit. I told it if it must stay, then it can have my room for half the day when I was gone, but must leave me alone when I'm home. I was never bothered again. I have a lot of other experiences, but this is the one that sticks with me. A few times I used to visit the cemetery with a couple of friends that I had in middle school. Something about it made me interested, and I like doing genealogy type stuff. Anyways, it's an old cemetery going back to the 19th century, so it has really old graves and covers 10 acres of land. The earthquakes our city had in 2011 and 2013 has severely damaged a lot of the graves. On one occasion, my friends and I went to the section with the older graves going back as far as 1918. A lot of the tombstones and monuments had collapsed or were badly cracked, so we couldn't get much information from them. Some of the engraved words had been completely weathered away, but the granite ones remained in good condition, and we could decipher the names and the dates of some of the gravestones. All of a sudden, and unexplainably, as we went past a row of graves, we felt this sudden shift in temperature and atmosphere. It's really hard to explain, but it was so disturbing, I could still recall the eerie feeling that came over us. One of my friends started to cry. Now she does this often, and usually for no reason, but in this case it was suitable. And my other friend was like, let's go, and was really freaked out. I didn't need telling twice, and we all booked it out of one of the entrances onto one of the residential streets, breathing hard and our hearts pounding. I can't remember the conversation or the dialogue that followed, but I can imagine it went along the lines of what was going on and what did we just experience. At the time, we were only about 11 or 12 years old, and it was terrifying. We didn't go back after that experience. Even going now, as an adult, brings that uneasy memory back. Fast forward to a few years later and I'm still in contact with both of my friends from middle school. We happened to mention that day in the cemetery, and my friend brought something up that I didn't know at the time. If I did, I would have had nightmares. She says to me that she didn't just get a bad feeling, she actually saw something glide by the row of graves we just went past. It was completely black, like a cape-like figure, and it turned to grin with an awful wide-like smile. Whatever it was, she said it was evil and not human. Even knowing this now as an adult freaks me out, but if I would have known this when I was 11 or 12, I would have been deeply traumatized and probably had anxiety. Overall, it was a crazy experience and I don't plan on ever going back there. The This happened to me when I was a teenager. I got a summer job working with another girl in our city's biggest cemetery. Our job was to pick up litter and fake flowers that would get blown away from the graves by the wind, basically just tidying up the place so the groundskeeper didn't have to. That particular cemetery is one of the largest in the Midwest. It has lots of paved roads and walkways, and it's popular with tourists, dog walkers, and bicyclers. Some people will even use it as a park because it's very pretty, but unfortunately, they will drop their litter on the ground. So one afternoon, the other girl and I were walking the paved roads in there with a trash bag, looking for litter. We came upon a particular area of the cemetery that has lots of mausoleums. We turned around one of the corners that goes along the side of the mausoleum. As we rounded it, there was an older gentleman, maybe in his late 60s, early 70s, standing with his back against the side of the mausoleum. He was just looking at the plot of graves nearby. Now there's two things that were kind of weird about him. The first thing, he was dressed a bit odd. His clothes were a little out of date, and it reminded me of how an older person would dress in the 1950s. He was wearing a corduroy jacket in 80-degree weather with a hat on, long pants, and a button-up shirt. Just something about the colors and patterns on his jacket, cap, and shirt screamed late 1950s or 60s. But when you think about it, a lot of elderly people kind of dress in out-of-date clothes anyways. So I shrugged it off. The second thing, he had a coffee mug he was drinking out of. Not a thermos or a styrofoam cup with a lid. It was an actual ceramic coffee mug that he was sipping out of. This man was just in the middle of the cemetery. As we walked by him, the other girl and I looked at him, and he looked up at us. He smiled, raised the other hand he wasn't holding the coffee mug with, and waved. We waved back and kept walking. We were only a few feet away when the other girl said, "That was a little weird," and I responded by saying, "That's what I thought." When we both looked over our shoulders back at him, he was gone. We stopped and kind of took a few steps back to see if he'd walked around the mausoleum or something, but we couldn't see him anymore. We kind of had a weird feeling about it, but it really didn't bother us that much. We eventually quit looking around for him and went back to do our job. A couple of days later, we showed up for work and went to the building where the groundskeepers kept their equipment to grab a trash bag. We found one of the guys to let them know we were there. We talked to him for a few minutes, and I brought up seeing the old man by the mausoleum in the east section. The groundskeeper smiled and asked, "Did he have a coffee mug?" We both looked at each other, and then he said, "Yeah, that's our ghost. He's really not there, actually." We pressed for more explanation, and he said he's always seen in that spot, looking at a family plot, and always has a coffee mug. He said there is a grave for the wife, 2 daughters, and the husband. The husband's grave says that he died in the early 70s, and the wife and the 2 daughters' graves say they died a couple decades before, and the 3 of them have the exact same date of death, so it could be assumed that it was some sort of accident. They think he was the dad, and that he maybe used to visit his wife and daughter's graves a lot before he died. He told his people to see him for a few seconds, then he's gone. It absolutely blew our minds, and as creeped out as we were kind of excited that we experienced this.